Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. So I recently picked up the Legend of Zelda Game & Watch at my local Best Buy. It comes with Zelda 1 and 2 from the NES, as well as Link's Awakening from the original Game Boy. It also has a special version of Vermin, an old Game & Watch game, as well as a clock, and then a timer game as well. Now, I'm not one to usually buy little novelty things like this, but I thought it would be a great gift for my oldest son. He really loves Zelda things. And also, I thought it'd be kind of neat to test it out first. It's my right as a father to make sure everything works properly. So we're going to make a quick video here of just everything to expect with this device. And then I'm also hoping that my son just doesn't watch this video and realize that this is coming for him for Christmas. But given the fact that this is not a Minecraft video, I don't expect him to watch it. So taking a look inside the box, it does come with a quick user guide. Not a lot of information in here, but one thing to make note of, if you let the battery drain or you hold down power for more than 5 seconds, all of your save state data will probably get wiped. But in-game saves will work fine anyway. The little cardboard container that it comes with actually functions as a stand. To be honest, this feels kind of cheap. I'm not really sure you're going to want to do that. It also comes with a Nintendo branded USB-C cable for charging. It's funny how they throw their logo on a cable like this and all of a sudden it looks really nice. Now this is obviously modeled after the original Game & Watch devices that came out in the early 80s, and this is the second in a series of Nintendo branded re-releases. The original one was for Super Mario Bros. I didn't pick that one up myself. And first impressions, this thing feels very light. It's surprisingly lighter than I thought it would be. There's not a lot going in terms of I/O. There's a USB port as well as a power button, and then on the left there is a speaker hole here. Other than that, not a lot going on the edges. Now the green accents are a little bit too green for my tastes, but I got used to it pretty quickly. The D-pad has a rubber membrane connection, and it feels really good, although it does feel very small. It is 16.84 millimeters in length, and it's one of the smallest D-pads I've ever seen. It's smaller than the Nintendo DS Lite, as well as the new Nintendo 2DS XL. Even if you compare it against a retro gaming emulation device like an Anbernic device, those are almost 5 millimeters bigger than this one. It's a very small D-pad. The D-pad is also made with a hard plastic, and it's so small I'm a little bit worried about diagonals, but we'll see how it goes with actual gameplay. On the opposite end, the face buttons are soft and rubbery. They also have a rubber membrane connection, but these buttons are rubber through and through. They have a rubbery texture to them. They're nice and grippy. I do like them. I don't think this is something you want to play Street Fighter on, but we're playing Zelda on these. The rest of the function buttons and start and select are all rubbery buttons. They remind me a lot of an old Game Boy Color. In terms of travel, I think these are a good length. They push down just about exactly what I would like. And the A and B buttons, they peak a little bit at the top. They're very rounded, and so because of that, they feel good when you push down on them. Now, it's obvious that Nintendo tried to keep to the spirit of the original Game & Watch devices, and in that sense, I think they nailed it. This device feels both old and new. So I mentioned this is a very light device, and as you can see here, it actually weighs 69 grams. Nice. Let's compare it against some similarly sized retro handhelds. This one here is the Powkiddy Q20 Mini. And this is a little bit thicker than the Game & Watch and a little bit heavier too. The only device that I have that matches this weight is the TrimUI Model S, and this is much smaller than the Game & Watch, but just about the same weight. The design of the screen here is a little bit weird looking. You know, the fact that the LCD display sticks out a little bit, but then also is inlaid within a bumper around the edges of it. And this kind of makes sense. It prevents it from getting scratched up if you were to throw it in your pocket, but all the same, you don't really see this design anymore. So let's turn it on and see what everything's like. So this is kind of a neat little splash screen here, and you can press the time button to start up the clock function here on the device. And the interface here is very simple. To get into the games, you press on the game button, and it'll give you the option of each of the available games. To set the time, you press the pause set button, and then, yep, you guessed it, you press set time. And like as the name implies, this thing can also function as a standalone watch or clock. Within the pause menu, you can also set the volume as well as the brightness. And the default setting is about 3/4 brightness, and honestly I found that to be the best. Everything bigger than that gets a little bit washed out. The speaker itself doesn't get super loud, but it is pretty loud. So in a nutshell, that's the majority of your settings. Let's start up a game here and see what this is like. So yeah, the sound is actually pretty good. I think it only has one speaker in it, but it still sounds fairly balanced. It sounds really good. It's hard to see, but the Triforce in the back actually lights up when you have the device on as well. Let me turn off my lights so you can see what I mean. So that's a nice little touch. And there's no light bleeding or anything else on the rest of the device. It's well made. As far as controls, it feels pretty good. The D-pad on the left feels like an original NES gamepad, and these rubberized face buttons are a little bit stickier than I would like, but they still feel pretty good. The screen itself is shiny and bright, but this does not have a glass film protector. This is basically just an LCD panel. Luckily, you can find glass screen protectors on Amazon for less than 10 bucks. In terms of size, this screen is 2.5 inches diagonally. And overall, I would say it's a pretty good screen. My major complaint with it is that the viewing angles aren't the best on it. If you don't look at the screen head on, it's actually quite a diminished experience. It works okay in low light levels, but all the same, I think 3/4 brightness seems to be the sweet spot. But like I said, the viewing angles on this are pretty bad. But I would say it's probably going to be fairly rare that you're not going to be looking at this straight on, so in that sense, I don't think the viewing angles are going to matter that much. But it definitely doesn't compare to the IPS panels that I'm used to with retro handheld devices. Now, a lot of the functions on this device are not very explicit. For example, it took me a while to figure out that if you press the start and select and A and B buttons all at once, it'll bring up a pause menu. And within here, you can restart your game or save it. And this isn't the only hidden thing they have. There's actually an entire page on the Nintendo website that'll walk you through all the different secrets that are available on this game. For example, there are cheats that you can enable by holding down the A button when you first start up a game, and it also highlights some of the differences with the various versions of the games that are available on here. And it'll detail a little bit more about manual saves, so I'll leave a link to this in the video description. So let's try out one of the secrets. We're going to hold down A when starting up a new game here. And as you can see, it gives you full hearts in Zelda 1. And given the fact that I am terrible at this game, I'm going to need all the hearts I can get. So this is a nice little cheat, at least for me. And of course, this isn't necessary, so if you want to play it the original way, you're more than welcome to do that too. And like I mentioned, there's different versions for each game, so if you hit left and right on each game, you can see that The Legend of Zelda has an English and Japanese version. Same thing with Zelda 2. And let's try that same trick, holding down the A button when starting up a new game. And after you hear the chime, it's going to start up the game and you're going to have an upgraded version of Link. And to be honest, I never owned any of these Zelda games. I played through the original Zelda 1 on the Wii Shop Virtual Console, but other than that, I never played Zelda 2 at all. So playing through this would be a completely new experience for me. Okay, moving on, let's try out Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy. So in addition to English and Japanese, this one's available in French and German as well. And they used a really unique colorization with this. It seems to me like a mint green and black together. It reminds me of ice cream. And I'm not really sure why they picked this one. I mean, the DMG coloring might have been a little bit better, but I'm not really sure. And this one has the ability to stretch the display all the way to the full screen, or you can put it in the original aspect ratio. Personally, I like the original aspect ratio, but either one looks pretty good. Of all the games on here, I think this is the one my son's going to like the most. He has the upgraded version of Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch, but I think he's going to be interested in this classic one as well. This one also has the same ability to enable cheats by holding down the A button, and by doing so, you're going to get full hearts as well as the upgraded version of Link's Sword. And so that's a nice touch as well. I like the fact that they've added a little bit of diversity to each of these games. One other neat function of this is that each of these games have a suspend state. So say, for example, you close out of a game and you start up a different one, it's actually going to have a save state enabled and you'll be able to jump right back into it. But like I mentioned, if you power off the device or let the battery drain, you're going to lose your save state. So make sure you do manual saves as well. Okay, moving on here. Here are the Game & Watch Vermin games that are available. And there's two different games, Game A and Game B. And these are basically the same game, just Game B is faster. And for this game, you don't need to use the buttons at all. All you do is just move Link left and right, and then he will whack the mole as it gets closer. Game A is super simple, it's almost boringly simple, but Game B does speed up quite a bit. It does become a bit of a challenge. It's kind of amazing to think how far Nintendo has come in the last 40 years. To go from something like Vermin to Breath of the Wild is pretty amazing. And finally, the last option is called Timer, and basically what you do is you set a time limit, and then based on however much time you chose, you have that much time to kill as many enemies as possible in a Zelda 2 kind of fashion. But that's really the gist of the game, just try to kill as many enemies as you can in the allotted time. Okay, I'm not really sure how big the battery is on this, I couldn't find any details on it, but when you do charge it up, it doesn't actually show you any sort of indicator light. So it's hard to tell whether or not you're charging, but if you go into the game menu, you can see that it does have a little charging icon. And Nintendo also didn't disclose the battery life, but I've been told it's around 6 hours. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about ergonomics and comfort when playing this game. Like I've mentioned a couple times now, the D-pad is surprisingly small. It is a little bit too small for my tastes. But I needed a different opinion, and obviously I couldn't ask my 12-year-old, so I asked my 5-year-old son if he would test it out for me. And of course he was happy to oblige, and so here's a 5-year-old playing the Game & Watch. Overall, he said it was pretty comfortable, but he did mention that the squared off edges of the device itself were a little bit rough on his hands. I think he's just so used to rounded controllers that this was a little bit off-putting to him. But size-wise, it was good. So now I want to take a minute or two and do some comparisons of this device against other retro handhelds. We're going to start with the Anbernic RG300X. You can find this device for around $80, and it can play thousands of games. We're going to focus just on the Zelda games here real quick, but I want to show you what the experience is like compared to the other. So a couple differences. This one has a 3-inch screen and a 640 by 480 display. I'm not really sure what the resolution is on the Game & Watch. Again, that's something that Nintendo didn't disclose, but it does look fairly good. I think the scaling is just about right. The text looks good, and the character sprites look accurate as well. Now the 300X has an LCD filter as well as some bilinear filtering going on, but it does look really good as well. It fills out most of this 3-inch screen and has a really nice and sharp texture to it. Now the 300X can also play the Game Boy Color version, and when you compare these two, it's kind of night and day. You know, the mint green coloring on the Game & Watch looks okay on its own, but when you compare it against something like the Game Boy Color, it's a huge difference. The Game Boy Color just looks stunning. And sure, it may not have the classic feel of an original Game Boy game, but all the same, it's stunningly beautiful. Now the 300X costs about $30 more than the Game & Watch, but obviously it has quite a bit more features. It can play thousands of games all the way up to the PS1. It has stereo speakers, as well as HDMI out to play on your TV. It is quite a bit bigger, but all the same, it's still relatively pocketable, and definitely has a Nintendo quality feel to it. And I think this Game Boy Micro design and Game & Watch color scheme do contrast nicely with this Zelda Game & Watch. So wrapping up, let's do a couple quick screen comparisons. Here's the original Game & Watch. I think the scaling here looks pretty good. Like I said, the text is sharp and clear. Moving over to the Powkiddy Q20 Mini, this has a 320 by 240 resolution, and scaling this does look pretty bad. I have to use integer scaling here and then widen it out for the correct aspect ratio, and I don't think it looks very good. Here's the Anbernic RG280V. It has a 2.8-inch screen, and I think Nintendo games on this look very good. I don't think it scales as well as the RG300X with the 640 by 480 display. This is probably the best out of these plastic, smaller handhelds that I own. Comparing all four at once, I think it's pretty obvious that the Q20 Mini just doesn't have the same amount of quality. You know, the screen is a lot warmer than the others. And even though this is $10 cheaper than the Game & Watch, the quality is pretty bad on this. So maybe a different option would be the RG280M, which I just recently reviewed, which has the same screen as the RG280V. Now comparing all four of these screens together, you can tell that the Game & Watch just isn't quite as vibrant as the other screens, and the blacks are nowhere near as deep as they are on the others. So when it comes to overall screen quality, I think any of these devices beat it out. But in terms of features and scaling, of these four, if I was going to play a Legend of Zelda game, I would be torn between the 280V for its pocketability and the RG300X for its beautiful screen and HDMI out. So yeah, all in all, what do I think of the Legend of Zelda Game & Watch? This thing costs $50, and to be honest, it's really just a collector's item. If you are a huge Zelda fan, or you want to get this for somebody for a gift, like what I'm doing for my son, then sure, it makes a lot of sense. And so if you like just collecting little things like this, or you have every intention of actually playing through the entire game, this might be worth it. And while I don't think they're in direct competition, I do think that a Chinese retro handheld emulation device is gonna be better bang for your buck. You'll be able to play these games, plus a lot more, and potentially have better features and a better screen. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm interested to hear if you picked one of these up or if you're considering it as a gift. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.